Remove this woman, please. Permanently.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and with the recent release of Wonder Woman 1984 in theaters and on HBO Max, today we're going to be taking a look at the major events in the film, some of the hidden Easter eggs and how it compares to the comics, before concluding with our review of the film.
It can be better.
Before we begin, we'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a like, as it will help us with the YouTube algorithm. With that being said, loosely based on Wonder Woman 1987, the Countdown to Infinite Crises one-shot, the 6-part OMAC project featuring Maxwell Lord, W.W. Jacobs' supernatural short story The Monkey's Paw, and the 80s. Wonder Woman 1984 is the latest entry in the DCEU, but one which takes place many years before the events of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which featured our first sighting of Diana Prince. Much like 1984's predecessor, the film sets up Diana's motivations in the present day by exploring her past in more detail. The film begins with an exciting prologue on the island of Themyscira, where we meet a young Diana Prince taking part in an athletic competition to honor the great Amazonian golden warrior Asteria, who single-handedly held her ground against the armies of all men as her sisters fled to safety. Asteria is a new addition to the Wonder Woman lore, but the competition is a reference to the Amazon Games contest held by Queen Hippolyta in the first issue of Wonder Woman 1987, which was designed to pick someone worthy of the Wonder Woman title that would act as their representative to the rest of the world. The young Diana leads the charge for most of the race thanks to being the daughter of Zeus, but falls off her horse, forcing her to take a shortcut, and despite nearly winning the competition, she's disqualified for cheating.
No true hero is born from lies.
Diana essentially falls because she's distracted by what's behind her and cheats to achieve what she wanted, foreshadowing the same mistake she would later make on a grander scale, and the lesson she would finally learn about how taking a shortcut leads to entitlement and the insatiable hunger for more that comes with it.
What is there to wish for but more?
The audience is then transported to Washington, D.C. in the year 1984, where we finally see Wonder Woman swing into action in a montage of superhero rescue scenes reminiscent of Richard Donner's Superman. The transition from ancient Grecian Olympia to 80s era America brings with it a satisfying and unexpected change in cinematography and sound design. Shots are framed in an almost low fidelity Raiders of the Lost Ark vibe, and colours become muted, but strangely more colourful at the same time. The 80s was actually a deliberate choice by Jenkins, as it's widely considered to be the decade of greed, where money was worshipped and unchecked materialism was peaking, which ties into the morality tale of the film.
The dream of financial success. We're reminded of it constantly. We see it on our TV screens, on the covers of magazines, and in the lives of others. How do we achieve the financial freedom that will make it possible for us to transform our dreams into reality?
I was on board for this wacky Thor Ragnarok style reinvention, and the first act is by far the best part of the film. It's just a shame that the style fades into dull contemporary circles, with the film losing its 80s charm and playfulness as the story progresses. We then meet Diana back at the Smithsonian, where she bumps into a new employee, a gemologist called Barbara Minerva, played by Kristen Wiig, who goes full Michelle Pfeiffer, as a warm, loving, deeply insecure, and mostly invisible worker that transforms into a feline to be reckoned with.
Do you happen to know who a Barbara Minerva is?
I'm Barbara. Remember you hired me?
It's nice to meet you.
We've met.
After getting to know each other, the pair identify a cache of stolen artifacts recovered from the attempted robbery foiled by Wonder Woman, including an object inscribed in Latin called the dreamstone.
The language of the gods. Which god wrote it is the question.
Created by the Duke of Deception, Dolos, the god of lies, treachery, and mischief, the artifact was imbued by a universal element that would grant a person anything they desired. But every wish made using the stone had a hidden toll that had to be paid, a reckoning that balances out the good that has been evoked.
The monkey's paw.
The Duke of Deception is actually one of Wonder Woman's oldest enemies in the comics, first appearing in Wonder Woman issue number 2 as a servant of Ares, the god of war, where he spread misinformation to turn people against each other. While the characters don't realize this till later, we see the effects of the Dreamstone immediately when one of Diana's colleagues walks past them and wishes he had a coffee, a wish which is immediately granted, but comes with a reckoning that balances out the good fortune, with the man immediately burning his lips. Without realizing it, Diana also unwittingly uses the stone by wishing for more time with Steve, and the Dreamstone brings him back in another man's body. This is actually a small tribute to the late Lyle Wagner, who played Steve Trevor alongside Linda Carter in the television series, and bears a striking resemblance to the man whose body Steve begins inhabiting in the film.
Diana? Is that really you?
From Steve's resurrection onwards, the film puts a spin on the dynamic between Steve Trevor and Diana Prince from the previous film, with Steve now the one thrust into unfamiliar surroundings and Diana serving as his guide.
Whoa. Don't worry. It's fine. It's just a move.
And we just, what did you call it, sway? We just sway.
Not realizing that Diana is in fact Wonder Woman, Barbara makes a wish to be more like her, and is bestowed with grace, confidence, and superpowers that sets her on the way to transforming into Cheetah, one of Wonder Woman's most formidable enemies in the comics. Unfortunately, the return of Steve has come at the cost of Diana's powers, while Minerva's superhuman abilities have begun to drain her of her humanity. While Wonder Woman losing her powers isn't rooted in any of the comics, it's incredibly similar to how Superman lost his powers in the 1981 film Superman 2 after choosing love over being a hero, a film that 1984 draws a lot of parallels with. It's also interesting to note that there is an artifact in the comics called the dreamstone that was wielded by Dr. Destiny, allowing him to look into the dreams of others and turn it into reality.
So who's the next closest person with oil?
Meanwhile, failing businessman Maxwell Lord, played to perfection by Pedro Pascal, arrives at the Smithsonian and offers to donate millions of dollars to the museum at the upcoming gala.
I have a great relationship with Sears. I can get you a brand new TV by the end of the day. 19 inches, no strings attached.
Unbeknownst to everyone, Max Lord had actually organized a robbery at the start, with the aim of getting his hands on the Dreamstone, something he'd been after for quite some time to save his failing company. It's important to note that this Maxwell Lord is very different to the one in Detective Comics, who is legitimately a supervillain. In the 2005 one-shot Countdown to Infinite Crisis, Wonder Woman 1987, and the 6-issue limited series The OMAC Project, which, as mentioned earlier, this film is very loosely based on, Max uses a nanovirus to create an army of cyborgs programmed to hunt down and kill all superhumans. In addition to being a sleazy businessman like his film counterpart, Max eventually discovers he has a latent metahuman gene, which, once activated, gave him the ability to control the minds of the most powerful metahumans. Using this, he tricks Superman into beating Batman to a pulp, with the Man of Steel believing that he was fighting the villain Brainiac, before getting him to fight Wonder Woman in front of the world by making him think that she was Doomsday. This ends up being a tactical masterpiece, with Lord broadcasting the fight for everyone to see, and justifying the resulting destruction in the streets as proof of his arguments about superhumans being dangerous. While the character takes a massive deviation from the power-hungry Maxwell Lord in the comics, and let's be fair, there are more deviations in the DCEU than there are in a math quiz about standard deviations, and his conclusion is drastically different, which we'll discuss at the end. Pascal's characterization of Maxwell as a floundering 80s business tycoon flawlessly fits into the setting of the film.
You don't need a pile of money or some business degree to get started.
If you know my technique to make a fortune, you don't need a credit. You don't need money. You don't even need a college degree to get started. If you have a desire, get the guts, come to my seminar. My system can show you how to put money in your pocket in real estate right away.
Max uses his snake-like charm to seduce Barbara and gain access to her office where the Dreamstone is kept. Taking the artifact for himself, he revives his company's fortunes before turning to bigger aspirations by wishing himself to be the physical embodiment of the stone. By doing this, he gains the power to grant wishes, whilst also being able to take anything he wants from those that made a wish.
And in return, I will take your oil.
Each wisher is granted just one wish, as evidenced when Lord tries to get one of his staff members to wish for something else, and it doesn't work since the man had already wished for a Porsche. But as Lord becomes more powerful, the rules seem to change entirely, with people not needing to say anything at all but yes to whatever Max suggests that they should wish for.
How's traffic? Huh? Terrible. Don't you wish it wasn't? And that everywhere you went, parted like the Great Red Sea? Of course I wish that.
This is where we start running into problems, with the movie seemingly making up the rules as it went to facilitate the plot. Using the stone, Max heads to Cairo, where he meets with Emir Abydos, a powerful and influential oil baron, and grants him his wish of having his ancestral lands, which he described as the Baalian dynasty, restored in return for his small militia. Baalia is actually a fictional Middle Eastern nation in the comics, which, incidentally, first appeared in the same Justice League International story arc that introduced Maxwell Lord. As is to be expected, Emir's wish has disastrous consequences, not just on Cairo, with the wall erecting itself around the city, but on the rest of the world at large, with the Soviet Union recognizing Emir's claims to the lands of Egypt, while America sides with the government, further adding fuel to the Cold War. Utilizing the old magic her father had used to hide Themyscira, Diana turns one of the planes at the Smithsonian invisible, enabling her and Steve to look for Max without being tracked, in a nod to the invisible jet in Linda Carter's Wonder Woman. Pre-Infinite Crisis, Wonder Woman couldn't fly and had to use her invisible jet. That was until stories in the 1950s had her develop the ability to ride wind currents, allowing her to imitate flight for short distances. But this obviously had limitations, and if there was no wind and the air was still, she was stuck, making the jet essential. It's not until post-Infinite Crisis, in Wonder Woman 1987, where a retcon explained the Greek god Hermes had blessed her with his own legendary speed and flight, that she was able to take off like Superman. Diana and Steve then follow Max to Cairo, and the two, along with Barbara, discover that the stone had appeared throughout history in civilizations that subsequently collapsed, from Carthage 146 BC, Rome 476 AD, to the Mayans around 900 AD. They also learn from a Mayan descendant and Rastafarian that the only way to remove both the negative and positive effects of the dreamstone was to destroy the stone, in this case Max, or renounce the wish altogether. The final act of Wonder Woman 1984 is where the morality story of be careful what you wish for comes into full swing. Max, now in control of half the planet's oil, and with the command and authority of the president, grants the entire world their wishes through a new broadcast system developed by the military, in return for a portion of their power and life essence to compensate for his diminishing health.
Can I take your health and your strength? Can I take your power? Can I take your life force?
With the world heading towards ruin,
I told a man I wanted a farm. I didn't mean here.
Steve makes one final push to force Diana to rescind her wish and let him go, which she reluctantly does. Barbara, on the other hand, is granted a second wish to become an apex predator, as reward for saving Max's life, with Lord giving her the rage and prowess of everybody on Earth, transforming her into the ferocious cheetah. This, once again, is drastically different to the source material, where Barbara is an ambitious, selfish, and neurotic heiress to a vast dynasty who becomes an archaeologist to covet precious historical items, and gets her powers through a Black Panther-esque type ritual that's technically a curse, but I guess
ain't nobody got time for that!
Using the advice Steve had given her, and a lasso for momentum, we see Diana develop the ability to fly, which, as mentioned earlier, was expanded from riding air currents to full-on flying, turning her into Superman, without his weakness to kryptonite and magic. This starts creating some continuity issues, and begs the question, why can't she fly in Justice League and Batman v Superman? And why is she flying commercial in Batman v Superman when she has her own invisible private jet? Donning the Golden Eagle armor of Hysteria, Wonder Woman confronts Cheetah in a final confrontation, and wins as expected. But her humanity in victory is a nice touch and lends to the overall earnest nature of the film. It's just a shame that they set the final battle in a dimly lit, overly blue-filtered enclosure. Seriously, everything about this place looks dull and inauthentic, and screams of a bad production set. While The Legend of Hysteria is an original creation in the DCEU, her golden armor first appeared in the 1996 miniseries Kingdom Come, and was worn by a future version of Wonder Woman. It wasn't until a few years later, in Wonder Woman issue number 144, that the suit was explained as being a gift to Diana from the Amazon blacksmith palace. After defeating Barbara, Diana heads to the TV station and confronts Max. Using a lasso of truth, she speaks to the rest of the world through Max and convinces everyone to renounce their wishes. Max is also shown visions of his unhappy childhood and his own son, whom he'd neglected. Realizing the terrible toll his wishes were placing on not just his child, but the world at large, Max renounces his wishes and those of everyone else in the world, averting the civilization-ending apocalypse that usually accompanies the usage of Dolus' dreamstone. This, once again, is in stark contrast to Max's actions in the comic books. In the aforementioned OMAC project and the fight it featured between Wonder Woman and Superman, Diana soon realizes that even as she defeated Superman, his mind was still under Max's control. She creates a diversion and races to Lord before using a lasso of truth to compel him to release Superman. Lord complies, but states that he would just do it all over again unless she killed him, and left with no other choice, the Amazonian snaps his head like a twig. This ended up being all a part of Lord's plan, and soon after this, a recording showing Diana's merciless attack is automatically broadcast to the world. As awesome as the OMAC storyline is, it wouldn't have worked here without the Justice League and the inclusion of all the other superheroes, who were either still kids or haven't been born yet in this timeline. It probably also wouldn't have fit the hopeful tone Jenkins was going for to have Diana break his neck. And to be fair, Man of Steel pretty much stole this moment from Wonder Woman as recompense for her stealing Superman's powers of flight. While Maxwell Lord's story arc comes to a close, the film ends with Barbara in a normal human form, looking over a cliffside. Jenkins stated that she wanted the ending to be ambiguous, and while it does hint to Barbara having lost her power, it's important to note that her first wish to be like Diana was granted by the dreamstone and not Max, meaning that while she no longer had the prowess and rage of an apex predator, she still had Wonder Woman's abilities, potentially setting her up for another confrontation in the future. With the world restored to normal, the film flashes forward a few months to a post-credit scene featuring Asteria, played by former Wonder Woman Linda Carter, who saves her mother and her baby from a falling beam. We know, thanks to Batman vs Superman and Justice League, that Wonder Woman will eventually team up with the other League members to help defend the Earth from both Doomsday and the ultimate mummy's boy, Steppenwolf.
Mother, at last you call me home.
Because the future of the DCEU is murky at best, Wonder Woman doesn't really tie into any future projects or set up a sequel, but I guess in the meantime she'll be protecting people from the shadows just like Asteria. Overall, Wonder Woman 1984 is an okay, old-school approach to comic book movies. It avoids the CGI-drenched battles of other genre pieces in favor of a heartfelt, low-key morality story that harkens back to the mythological tales of caution, power, and consequence that inspired comic books in the first place. It has some terrific scenes. The opening gambit on Themyscira and the montage with Wonder Woman are awesome, as are some of the more emotional moments between Steve and Diana. Honestly, Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Kristen Wiig, and especially Pedro Pascal were all outstanding when the script permits it, but the film is riddled with so many structural problems that it holds it back. From pacing, weak subplots, the drastic deviations from the source material, to the film playing fast and loose with the rules regarding how the Dreamstone works. Steve coming back into a surrogate body makes absolutely no sense, considering others could wish for nuclear weapons, changes in legislation, to changes to an entire city. So why did the Dreamstone put him in the body of some random guy, especially if we're just going to see Chris Pine for the rest of the movie anyway? The armor of Asteria is also hyped up throughout the film as something Wonder Woman needs, but it ends up being pretty useless, and Wonder Woman saves the day without it. So why is it in the film? And why is the introduction at Themyscira necessary? It's almost like they went to all this effort having Steve in a surrogate body and introducing the whole Golden Armor story to just pay homage to the Linda Carter era of Wonder Woman by having her in a cameo at the end, which is awesome, but not worth derailing the entire film. Also, because Max rescinding his wishes essentially undid most of the plot, the fact that the entire world joined together to renounce their wish instantly becomes inconsequential, which completely undercuts the climax of the film, which is supposed to transcend our main characters. With that being said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the film and whether you picked up any other Easter eggs, so please share these in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification icon to stay up to date on all my content, and if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.